I, 31F, grew up in what most people would call a respectable family, the kind that pretends everything's perfect on the outside but slowly rots from the inside. My younger brother, Liam, 27M, has always been the golden child. Since we were little, our parents treated him like the sun, and me like the shadow that shouldn't get in the way of his light. When he failed a class, it was because the teacher didn't understand his creative mind. When I got straight A's, my mom would just say, "Well, of course you did. You're the responsible one." That's the thing about being the responsible one. People stop seeing you as human. Liam never really grew up. He switched from one hobby to another, one dream to another: musician, photographer, crypto investor. While I worked my way up from assistant editor to managing editor at a publishing house, I bought my own apartment at 28. He still lived at home, sleeping until noon, calling himself a free spirit. When I met Ethan, 33M, it felt like my luck had finally turned. He was calm, grounded, and kind. A history teacher who loved books and quiet mornings as much as I did. We met at a literary festival, fell in love over coffee and poetry, and after 2 years, he proposed during a trip to the Scottish Highlands. It was the happiest moment of my life. Of course, I introduced Ethan to my family soon after. My dad liked him immediately. My mom approved of his job, and Liam was unusually friendly. He'd always been a little dismissive toward the people I dated, but with Ethan, he was all smiles and jokes, insisting on being his brother-in-law buddy. I thought it was sweet at first, a rare sign of maturity from him. As the wedding approached, Ethan started spending more time at my parents' house. He said Liam made him laugh, that it was nice to hang out with someone more relaxed. Sometimes he'd go help Liam with music gigs, or they'd play video games together late into the night. I didn't mind. I wanted Ethan to feel at home with my family. I was busy planning the wedding anyway. Seating charts, catering, venues, all the chaotic little details that come with trying to make one perfect day. But then the weird things started. Liam would make jokes that felt off, like calling Ethan my soulmate when he handed him a beer, or teasing me about how Ethan always listens to my advice more than yours. My mom would laugh and say, "Oh, stop. You two are like brothers." And I'd force a smile even though something inside me felt unsettled. A month before the wedding, Ethan became distant. I'd ask if he was excited, and he'd say he was just tired from work. He started locking his phone, saying he needed space, being vague about his weekends. When I tried to talk to him, he'd deflect with, "You're just stressed about the wedding." I believed him. I wanted to believe him. Then came the dinner. My parents invited everyone over, saying it would be a nice break from wedding chaos. My mom cooked Liam's favorite food, as always, and everyone seemed cheerful. Halfway through the meal, Liam cleared his throat and said, "I have something important to say." I thought maybe he'd finally gotten a real job or was moving out. Instead, he smirked at me and said, "I'm going to be a father." I froze. I didn't even understand what he meant until my mom gasped and covered her mouth. Liam looked right at Ethan and said, "Tell her." Ethan went pale. My heart dropped into my stomach. Then he said the words that shattered me. "It's true. We made a mistake. I'm sorry." I don't remember much after that. My dad yelled. My mom started crying. Liam looked proud of himself, like he'd just won something. I drove home in silence, shaking, numb. That night, Ethan moved his things out of my apartment without even saying goodbye. I spent the next week in a fog. My mother called to say, "Try to forgive him. It's family." My father said, "He's your brother. You'll have to see them eventually." I blocked both of them. I couldn't bear to hear his name. But the story didn't end there. And it definitely didn't end the way Liam thought it would. Because a few months later, karma handed me an opportunity I never expected. 3 months after that night, I had moved to a new apartment across town and was trying to rebuild some sense of peace. Therapy helped, long walks helped, but what truly changed everything was a random encounter at a bookstore cafe. I was browsing the travel section when someone tapped my shoulder. It was Sophie, Liam's ex-girlfriend. Now, for context, Sophie and Liam dated for about 2 years, and he treated her like a disposable accessory. He cheated on her multiple times, borrowed money he never repaid, and broke up with her via text because he said he needed space to focus on his art. She was kind, gentle, and frankly, too good for him. The last time I'd seen her, she looked heartbroken. This time, though, she seemed stronger, more confident. She told me she'd heard about the scandal through mutual friends and wanted to say she was sorry. Not for what Liam did, but for how my parents had handled it. She said, "You always deserved better than that family dynamic." We ended up sitting there for hours, talking about everything: the favoritism, the gaslighting, the exhaustion of always being the reasonable one. At some point, we both started laughing at how absurd it all was. Then, when the laughter faded, there was this quiet understanding between us, a shared wound that made us strangely close. I didn't plan it, but that night we exchanged numbers and started talking regularly. What began as a mutual support system slowly became something deeper. Meanwhile, my family kept trying to drag me back into their chaos. My mom called almost every day saying things like, "Liam's trying, he's stressed, the baby changes everything." The baby. That word hit me like a knife. I couldn't even picture it. My brother raising a child with my ex-fiancé. It felt like a bad soap opera that somehow became my life. Then one evening, my father called, and this time, his voice sounded tired, broken. He said, "Your brother's in trouble." Apparently, Liam had been arrested for damaging property after a fight outside a bar. He'd lost his job, some short-lived gig at a radio station, and Ethan had disappeared from the picture completely. My mother was in tears, begging me to come home and help. I didn't go. For once, I refused to be the one who fixes things. Instead, I called Sophie to vent. She listened quietly, then said something I'll never forget. "You can't save them, but you can save yourself." Those words sank deep into my bones. I realized I'd been living my whole life cleaning up after their chaos, and it had only ever cost me my peace. A few weeks later, Sophie invited me to dinner at her apartment. She made homemade curry, we drank wine, and for the first time in months, I felt light again. She told me about her work in graphic design, her plans to open a small studio. I told her about the book I was editing. We ended up talking until 3 a.m., laughing about everything from bad dates to our shared hatred of Liam's playlists. Somewhere between laughter and silence, she reached out and took my hand. My first instinct was to pull away. It felt strange, unexpected. But then I didn't. It was gentle, honest, unforced. For the first time, it felt like someone was holding my hand because they saw me, not because they wanted something from me. We started seeing each other after that, quietly at first. I wasn't sure what to call it. Love? Healing? Maybe both. Meanwhile, my mother sent me photos of Liam's newborn baby girl, hoping it would soften my heart. I didn't reply. I couldn't. Every picture was a reminder of what had been taken from me. And maybe, in a twisted way, what I had escaped. Then one evening in late spring, I got a text from an unknown number. It was Ethan. He wrote, "I made a mistake. I miss you. Liam's impossible. Please, can we talk?" My first reaction wasn't sadness or nostalgia. It was laughter, the bitter, hollow kind that comes from realizing how predictable some people are. I didn't respond, but something in me clicked that night. It was time for closure, and maybe, just maybe, a bit of poetic justice. What happened next wasn't planned, but it became the most defining choice of my life. A week after Ethan texted me, I was still debating whether to ignore it completely or meet him just to get closure. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet, not because I missed him, but because I wanted to look him in the eyes and see if he still believed he could play me like before. We met at a cafe downtown, the same one where he used to grade papers while I edited manuscripts beside him. He looked older, tired, and strangely nervous. "You look great," he said, like that would erase what he'd done. He told me things hadn't worked out with Liam, that my brother was immature, that the relationship had been a mistake driven by confusion. He claimed he realized too late that I was the person he truly loved. I remember stirring my coffee slowly, watching the cream swirl. I didn't even feel anger anymore, just clarity. I told him I was seeing someone new. His face changed immediately, a mix of shock and entitlement. "You moved on already?" he said. "With who?" I smiled and said, "Someone who knows exactly how awful my brother can be." He looked confused for a moment, and then realization hit him. "Wait, Sophie?" he said, his voice dropping. When I didn't deny it, he actually laughed, a bitter, mocking sound. "So this is revenge, huh? You're using her to get back at me?" That was the first and last time I raised my voice in that cafe. I said, "No. I'm with her because she treats me like a human being, something you and my family never did." And with that, I stood up and left. Later that night, I told Sophie about it. She just smiled sadly and said, "He's the kind of man who only values something after breaking it." I realized she was right. Ethan didn't want me. He wanted control, forgiveness without accountability. The next few months were surprisingly peaceful. Sophie and I moved in together, shared mornings full of laughter, dinners full of quiet comfort. My father started reaching out again cautiously. He'd finally started to see how toxic the family dynamic was, and for the first time, he apologized. He said, "I should have protected you from your mother's favoritism. I failed you." I cried after that call. Then one afternoon, I got a text from my mom. "We're having a family dinner this weekend. Please come. We all need closure." I almost deleted it, but curiosity got the better of me. Part of me wanted to see if Liam and Ethan would even have the nerve to show their faces. Sophie encouraged me to go, saying, "You deserve to show them that you're doing better, not to prove anything, just to live freely." So I went. When I walked in, everyone froze. My mom smiled that performative smile of hers and said, "It's so good to see you, honey. You look different." Liam looked worse than I'd ever seen him. Messy hair, bags under his eyes, a nervous twitch. He muttered a quiet hello. My father nodded at me with a look of quiet support. Ethan wasn't there, which honestly made things easier, but the baby was. My niece. She was beautiful. I wasn't prepared for how emotional it would feel to see her. She had my brother's eyes, but an innocence that broke my heart. For a moment, I felt an ache of compassion I hadn't expected. Dinner was tense, but civil until my mother, of course, couldn't leave things alone. She said, "Liam's been through a lot, you know. He's doing his best as a father. Maybe it's time you two made peace." I laughed, out loud. "Peace?" I said. "He destroyed my engagement and my sense of trust, and you want peace because he's been through a lot? What about what I've been through?" Liam snapped, saying, "You're always the victim, aren't you? You think you're better than everyone." I stood up, grabbed my coat, and told him, "No, Liam, I just finally stopped letting you use me as a doormat." Then I left, again. But this time, I didn't cry in my car. I smiled, because unlike before, I wasn't walking away from something. I was walking toward peace. 2 days later, my mom called to say I had humiliated my brother in front of the family. I told her I wasn't responsible for how truth made people feel, but karma, as I learned, wasn't done with any of us yet, especially not with Ethan and Liam. About a month after that disastrous dinner, my father called again. But this time, he sounded oddly calm. "You might want to sit down," he said. "It's about Liam and Ethan." Apparently, the two of them had started working together. Ethan had been tutoring part-time, and Liam had offered to help with some small online project involving sponsorships and content creation, something to do with parenting advice of all things. It sounded ridiculous even before I knew the rest. The project was actually a scam. Liam had convinced Ethan to invest money into a startup that never existed, using his old contacts to fake contracts and brand partnerships. When it all came crashing down, Ethan filed a report, and guess who was suddenly facing fraud charges? My brother. My mother, of course, called me sobbing, saying that Ethan had set Liam up and that the poor boy didn't understand what he was signing. My father stayed quiet on the call. Later, he texted me privately, "Your brother needs a lawyer. Your mom wants me to ask you for money. I won't." I didn't even reply. It wasn't my problem anymore, but still, the irony didn't escape me. The man who betrayed me had now been betrayed by the very person he ruined my life with. Meanwhile, my relationship with Sophie had become something I never expected. Stable, calm, deeply supportive. We both came from different kinds of pain, but together we found this quiet rhythm that healed parts of us we didn't know were broken. Sometimes I'd wake up next to her, watch the morning light fall across her face, and realize that if everything hadn't gone wrong back then, I never would have found this peace. Still, my family couldn't leave me alone. My mom started showing up at my office unannounced. She'd bring photos of my niece saying things like, "She's growing up so fast she should know her aunt." Then she'd pivot to guilt. "Your brother's heartbroken, he misses you." I tried to stay calm, but one day she crossed a line. She came to my apartment and told Sophie, "You're a nice girl, but you're just a rebound. She'll always be angry." Sophie, bless her, didn't lose her temper. She simply said, "Maybe anger is what happens when you confuse love with manipulation for too long." My mother left in tears. I think it was the first time anyone had ever told her the truth to her face. Weeks went by, and the situation with Liam got worse. He ended up losing custody rights temporarily because of an altercation during one of his supervised visits. My mother blamed stress. My father, on the other hand, finally filed for separation. He told me he couldn't spend the rest of his life apologizing for someone else's mistakes. He rented a small apartment near the coast and started painting again, something he hadn't done since his 20s. When he sent me a picture of one of his paintings, a stormy ocean under a glowing moon, I realized how symbolic it was. We were both learning to breathe again after years of drowning. Then one afternoon, I got another unexpected message. This time it was from Ethan's sister. She said Ethan had left the city. He'd lost his job, his reputation, everything. Apparently, he'd tried to reconcile with my brother after the fraud fallout, but Liam had stolen the remainder of his savings. He was broke and alone. I didn't reply to her message either. I just stared at the screen for a while, then turned it off. There was no satisfaction left to feel, only quiet closure. Sophie and I decided to take a trip to Italy that summer. We visited Florence, Venice, and a tiny coastal town where we spent long afternoons drinking wine and reading on the balcony. One night, watching the sunset, she turned to me and said, "You know, I think everything that happened to you led here, to this peace, to this moment." And for the first time in years, I agreed. But when we came back home, there was one more twist waiting. One last letter that reopened the past in a way I couldn't have predicted. When Sophie and I got back from Italy, life felt beautifully ordinary again. Work was stable. Our apartment smelled like fresh basil and coffee every morning, and I had learned to exist without the constant echo of family drama in my head. That peace lasted until the envelope arrived. It was handwritten, no return address, just my name in messy, familiar handwriting. Liam's. My first instinct was to throw it out, but curiosity got the better of me. Inside was a 2-page letter, written on cheap lined paper, smudged with what I swear looked like tears, or maybe spilled coffee. He started with, "You probably won't even read this, but I need you to know I'm sorry." He went on about how everything had fallen apart, how Ethan had vanished, how his daughter barely knew him, how Mom still treated him like a child even when he was trying to change. He admitted that what he did to me was unforgivable, but said he didn't mean to ruin my life. He said he'd been jealous his whole life, jealous of how I could do everything right while he felt like a failure pretending to be special. There was one line that really stuck with me. "Mom raised me to think I deserved everything without earning it, and you were raised to earn everything without expecting anything." It hit hard, because it was true. That one sentence summed up decades of imbalance, of emotional favoritism disguised as love. He ended the letter asking if I'd consider meeting him, not to fix things, but to at least not hate each other anymore. For days, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Sophie noticed, of course. She read my silence like a book. One evening she said, "If you need to see him, do it. But don't do it for him. Do it for yourself. To let go." So I agreed. We met at a park near my old neighborhood. He looked thinner, older, broken in a way that even his arrogance couldn't hide. When he saw me, he smiled awkwardly and said, "You came." The conversation was strange. He apologized several times, said he'd gone through therapy, and admitted that he'd always resented me for being the good one. He said, "It felt like you were the example I could never reach, so I wanted to knock you down." I told him, "You didn't just knock me down, Liam. You set my life on fire." He nodded, eyes glassy, and said, "I know." We sat in silence for a while. Then he pulled a photo from his wallet. His daughter. "Her name's Emily," he said. "She deserves a family that's not broken." And that's when something softened in me. I realized I didn't want revenge anymore. I didn't want him punished or humiliated. I just wanted freedom. Freedom from the bitterness, the old roles, the pain. So I told him I forgave him, not because he deserved it, but because I did. He cried. I didn't. I just felt light. When I came home, Sophie was waiting on the balcony with 2 glasses of wine. I told her everything, and she just smiled and said, "That's closure." But here's where it gets complicated. A week later, my mother found out I had met Liam. She called me screaming, accusing me of betraying the family by not inviting her, saying I'd forgiven him the wrong way. She actually said those words, the wrong way. That night, for the first time in my life, I blocked my mother's number permanently. It was terrifying and liberating. In the weeks that followed, I got occasional updates through my dad. Liam had started working in construction, paying child support, trying to be responsible. For the first time, I hoped he'd make it. I thought that was the end of the story. But life has a way of testing your peace, just when you think you've earned it. Because 2 months later, something happened at my job that brought my past, and my family, crashing back into my present. It was a Tuesday morning when my boss called me into her office. I'd been working at the publishing house for 5 years, and things were finally looking up. A promotion. A new editorial line I'd proposed, real progress. She looked uneasy, though, as if she didn't want to be the one to tell me something. "Claire," she said carefully, "we received a complaint about one of your upcoming book projects." My stomach dropped. A complaint? From who? She turned her monitor toward me and my blood ran cold. The email was from my mother. She'd written to my employer accusing me of plagiarizing a book proposal and publicly shaming the family through fictionalized revenge narratives. The book in question? A memoir-style collection I'd been working on titled The Golden Child Complex. It wasn't even about them directly. It was about family favoritism and emotional imbalance, inspired by my experiences. Yes, but never naming anyone. Still, she'd done everything to sabotage it. She even copied a local journalist on the email. I couldn't believe it. After everything, after years of therapy, forgiveness, distance, she was still trying to control me. I felt that old familiar anger bubbling up, but it wasn't rage this time. It was power. The kind of power that comes when you finally stop begging to be understood. I told my boss the truth, that my family had a history of manipulation and that this was personal retaliation. She believed me. The book went ahead. When it was published 6 months later, it became a quiet success. Not a bestseller, but enough to reach people who'd lived through the same kind of invisible chaos. Readers sent messages saying things like, "Your story made me feel seen. That was worth more than any revenge could ever bring." Around the same time, Sophie asked me to marry her. She didn't kneel or plan anything elaborate. We were just cooking dinner, laughing about how neither of us could chop onions properly when she said, "You know, I'd like to call you my wife someday." I laughed and said, "Then do it." So she did. We got married at a botanical garden with a handful of close friends and my father there. Smiling, proud, peaceful. My mother wasn't invited. Liam sent a short message the next morning. "You deserve this. Be happy." That was the last time I heard from him, and somehow that felt right. Today, years later, I sometimes reread that first Reddit post I almost made but never submitted. The one where I wanted strangers to tell me I wasn't crazy for feeling betrayed. I never posted it, but maybe this is my version of it now. I forgave the brother who betrayed me. I let go of the mother who couldn't love me equally. I built a life with someone who healed what they broke. But even now, sometimes at night, when the house is quiet and the city hums outside, I still wonder if choosing to walk away completely, to cut ties, publish my truth, and never look back, was selfish. So tell me honestly, am I the asshole? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. I genuinely want to know what you think.